we had Eric from Ledge Council in and walked us through the bill that House Judiciary is working on, H578. They asked us to take a look at a couple of sections, and we had that walkthrough. It was helpful. I think that for the committee to give some feedback, it would be useful for us in turn to hear from the Agency of Agriculture. And so we're pleased to have the state veterinarian with us this afternoon.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Levine. I'm the state veterinarian with the Agency of Agriculture. The draft of the bill that's on the screen was shared with us this morning. We were requested to be here yesterday, and it seems like some of our concerns were already addressed. So this might be short.
Sorry, before you jump in, we have a different draft, I think, posted today, so we'll fix that. It's, yeah. 3.1, yeah, thank you.
So the first concern that we had, which again has been addressed in the this morning's draft, was the inclusion of the language without a bona fide veterinary or husbandry purpose and intentional transfer or transmission of semen onto an animal. Their artificial insemination is key to many of our livestock industries. And the original version of this did not have an acknowledgement for husbandry practices. It did have them in the other. I think it was just an oversight. I don't think it was intentional, just wording choice. So we just wanted to make sure that we're protecting our right, our ability to do artificial insemination, without which we wouldn't have much of a dairy industry or a turkey industry, turns out. So making sure we're protecting veterinarian husbandry practices is important there. The other place that we wanted to make sure that we brought up, again, has already been a little bit addressed, page 12. I thought it was page 12. I remembered it was page 12, and it's not right there. Sorry for the scrolling, everyone.
Okay.
You can see my atrocious spelling. So the concern, here we go, is in section on enforcement, the different requirements for having a veterinarian present during different executions of enforcement action. The current law requires a veterinarian to be present during the execution of a warrant. I have a few times in the last 6 months been called to be present at bestiality cases in which they had sufficient evidence to receive a warrant and to execute the warrant. But because of this language, they were unable to find a veterinarian to accompany them. In those situations, a veterinarian's not going to add anything. There's no evidence that the vet is needing to provide, and the welfare of the animal from a seizure point of view is not in question, as far as, and not the welfare, the well-being of the animal. As far as physical condition, a veterinarian's not really going to add anything to the situation. And so this just is an expense and a hoop that in certain situations we'd like to find some leeway on. The language proposed this morning does allow for a little bit of leeway. Doesn't really get at the heart of whether or not a veterinarian is going to be additive to those situations, but we haven't had a chance to run this language by public safety to see how they feel about that, if that satisfies their purposes, as well as making sure there's a reasonable exemption in cases in which a physical examination of the animal is not required before seizure.
Just wondering, and I know Steve Collier is here as well, whether the sentence that's highlighted there essentially negates the using the word must, or is there another reason why the veterinarian must be there other than to lead to an enforcement action?
Sure. So Steve Collier from the Agency of Agriculture. So I believe that the reason that the requirement for a veterinarian to accompany is in there is so the veterinarian can assess the animal. I think it's protection for the owner. so that animals are not improperly seized based on the judgment of a law enforcement officer who may not be able to, as qualified, to assess the physical abilities of the animal. However, as Kate said, there are certain instances where a veterinarian adds nothing. If, for example, law enforcement has video of bestiality with a specific suspect, they can execute the warrant, seize whatever they have to do, including the animal, and a veterinarian's assessment of that animal is not going to add anything to probable cause in determining whether or not something should be seized. So I think that this is one, as I understand it, I haven't read the cases myself, but I believe the court has already interpreted this requirement as not. So there's different ways of requirements can be in statute. One way is if you don't do it in a criminal case, then the evidence is suppressed. So if you have, for example, the Fourth Amendment, if you violate the Fourth Amendment and go into someone's house without probable cause and seize things, then the evidence that you've seized in violation of the Fourth Amendment will be suppressed. You won't be able to use it. So you'll probably lose the case. The way this provision has been interpreted, in my understanding, is that even if you don't bring a veterinarian, that doesn't necessarily mean that you lose the case. So this, I think, is an effort to explain that failure to be accompanied by a veterinarian shall not be grounds for dismissal of the enforcement action. I think a better way to word that would be, should not be grounds for exclusion of the evidence, because you could exclude evidence without dismissing a case, but ultimately, if you exclude evidence, you're probably going to end up dismissing the case if that's your only evidence. But another way to do it, which Dr. Levine and I discussed, would just be explaining when a veterinarian is appropriate. And I think that's really whenever the condition of the animal, the health of the condition of the animal should be reviewed before seizure by a veterinarian. And you could still make it that even if the veterinarian is not there, you don't have to exclude the evidence. So there's a lot of discretion here about how to do it. We don't have a specific position. We reached out to law enforcement this morning just to try to find out where state law enforcement, just to try to see where they are, and haven't had a chance to complete that dialogue. But I don't think there's any real difference in opinion. I think everyone wants a vet to be there when it makes sense, but not when it doesn't. So there's to make the language, I think, reflect that purpose.
And there are examples in both the condition above and the condition below for having immediate or having a time-based restriction on having an animal inspected by a veterinarian if their condition is in question. It's just for whatever reason that middle section doesn't have that.
Representative Bartholomew.
I think what the chair was saying, and if I'm interpreting it correctly, that first sentence, they need to fix this because it says veterinarian must be present, and the next sentence says the veterinarian doesn't have to be present. Is that my reading? That's what you were saying, right? They need to fix that.
Yeah.
That's just weird.
They should, shall if practicable, leave that in there.
That's what I was gonna say. I mean, shall if practicable, like took care of it. I don't know why they took that one out and made it must and then added a condition.
Almost looks like a technical, like it was intended to be a technical correction along the way. But I wonder whether you just offered a couple of suggestions. If you're comfortable, maybe you're not quite yet, with putting those down and writing and want to send them for our consideration.
Sure, I will float them to our law enforcement partners, the state law enforcement partners, and then see if there's no objections or if there's consensus. So yeah, happy to share.
In any case, conceptually, it's really more just a question of making it elegant.
But it can be very important in judicial
Yeah.
action, and I think that the way the Supreme Court has interpreted it, it's not that important, but it's always better for the statutory language to actually do what's intended, even if the courts interpret that it's not necessarily required as this has.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did somebody else have a comment or question?
Just gonna go back to the top, unless that was still helpful. Sorry.
Right.
I believe those were
Yes, they are.
are there any other questions? Those were the
Yeah,
ones we had.
so yesterday when Ledge Council came through, they pointed us to the language in I think it's section 4 on forfeiture. and it might not be a question for you, Dr. Levine, but yes, go ahead, Representative Osborne.
Yeah, so yesterday, when the bill was presented to us, there was a section where it was described, basically, if somebody loses an animal because they have done something egregious to it, they still get to keep their chickens and cows.
Mhm.
And they were like, oh, we're gonna continue this. And I was thinking about that overnight, and I'm just kind of wondering if somebody kills their dog or whatever other animal they've mistreated to the point that the state gets involved. Is it appropriate for us to let them have any animals? I mean, I don't know. It just feels to me like maybe that's not sensible.
And those are certain conversations that we have started. This came to our attention pretty late. And so we are just now starting those
Yeah.
conversations
Yeah.
with ourselves and both internally and with our public safety partners.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hold off on answering that until we've
Okay.
finished those
So you guys
conversations.
are still thinking about that?
We're still
Okay.
working on what appears to be the
Okay, 'cause
appropriate
I
wording.
definitely am not settled that where things stand is the best policy.
Understood.
Okay.
So just to be sure that we're all aware of what section we're talking about here, and I see you did find section for what page is that?
That is page 6 of it starts at the very, very bottom of page 6, but the substance starts on page 7.
Yeah, because I mean, I think it says something like, you know, your animals will be seized and you can't have any animals for this many years, but you can have chickens and cows. And I just don't know if you
There we go.
can't have other animals because you've mistreated the ones you had so badly. If you deserve to have chickens and
So
cows.
can we just look at that language there? I don't think it's necessarily cows specifically. Is that what you were?
Well, it says livestock, so actually it's more than cows. So there are all kinds of animals that could be mistreated by somebody who had an animal taken and then they have a dog or they have not a dog, a goat or a cow or animal. I mean, yeah, livestock and poultry can be mistreated and I don't know.
So I think that we're looking at language that says, I do want to point out, we are looking at language that says for a first violation. And so I'll flag that. And that the language that struck, except livestock or poultry, there on line 2, has been sort of rephrased down on line 4. So I believe that Ledge Council, as they were explaining it yesterday, felt that this is somewhat of a clarification that under existing law, this was an instance of taking language that perhaps wasn't entirely clear and adding new language that was clarifying the original intent. Does that seem? I think that's what we heard yesterday. Does that seem to be consistent with your reading?
Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what's above that line, but the original proposal in this bill, the big thing that it did was it changed it from a judge having discretion to, if someone is convicted of animal cruelty, then the court already had discretion to ban an individual from having any other animals. But the original language in the bill changed it from mandatory 5-year ban of having any other animals. I think this is a later draft of that, which I haven't had a chance to read fully yet. And this has the different first violation, second violation. I'm not sure if it's mandatory or discretionary. Up above that, it should say one or the other. If it's mandatory,
May impose.
yeah, May is really leaves it up to the court to evaluate the specific circumstances to determine what's appropriate for that defendant. Shall is a mandatory minimum, which can work very well depending on the circumstance. It can also have an outsized impact depending on the circumstances. So I don't think we would have any concern with May. Court already has the authority to impose a sentence that it believes is appropriate. If it was a shall and a mandatory minimum, I just think that needs to be looked at a little bit more carefully. If for an example, response to Representative Boston's question, if somebody was convicted of animal cruelty to a cat, it would very much depend on the circumstances, I think, whether that should necessarily extend to their dairy cattle. Maybe, maybe not. But if you make it mandatory in the law, then you can't look at the circumstances to determine the applicability. Maybe it's the farmer's child who does it. And so then you're extending that to, there's just a lot of variables there that I think if you have a shall, it's different. Give the court the authority.
But so where it says livestock or poultry shall not be subject to forfeiture, that makes it sound to me like they don't have to be given up unless they were abusing those exact animals. So if you were abusing your goat, then your goat will be forfeited. But if you're
Sure.
abusing your dog and you have a goat, you get to keep the goat. I mean,
You're
to
right.
me, that line says shall not be means they get to keep it. It doesn't say the judge has discretion about it. And I feel like some language that makes some more nuanced consideration would probably be appropriate because, I mean, some of the stuff that you're talking about in terms of, I mean, bestiality and stuff, like, I mean, if people are mistreating animals, like, I don't know that they should be having other ones. And, you know, I feel like we're kind of giving where, because these are animals that people eat, they're not getting protected and it shouldn't be that way.
I agree with your interpretation of this language. I think probably it's more to the question of whether livelihood should be taken as a result of a single act or not. But you're right, this for a first offense would not allow you to seize livestock or poultry if it was some other type of animal.
But it also doesn't say that it's their livelihood.
True. But, yeah.
So it could be a single backyard.
Right.
And it wasn't livelihood yet. Okay. Representative Burke.
What's the difference in what is the first violation, like the first time you're found guilty of doing the thing? So second violation, so it'll be the second time you're found, okay.
Right.
Some guilty, not just.
Torture your dog once, then you torture your dog again. Yeah. It's just gross.
Seeing if there is a second violation under here. Probably somewhere. Again.
Totally somewhere, yeah. Representative Lipsky?
Yes, thank you.
Chairman, the time I've spent in the Judiciary Committee and search and seizure, the committee and their counsel was very reluctant to take someone's livelihood away. In this case, cattle or livestock and poultry, likely a farmer and mistreating a dog or whatever, the pet or other animal, it would be a step too far to take a farmer who may have a milking herd or whatever away. So that's just, I understand because I had to go through a whole lot of testimony. Actually, it was equipment, you know, it was timber harvesting, not farming, but that when you prohibit someone from practicing their trade or livelihood, that became a real problem. Anyway, comment.
There's a reason why with just a few minutes notice, we're not quite ready to discuss the specifics. For there are a lot of nuances.
There's also I think the distinction that Representative Boslin made between livestock or poultry, that is, you know, that's how you're making a living versus if you just have, you know, a pet or, right, you know,
A few animals.
yeah,
I was actually thinking more of the situation with a few animals.
a few, like a handful of small.
Yeah, I mean, somebody has 6 chickens or 6 goats or something.
So I think maybe what we're hearing from the agency is that they would like a little more time to consider these questions. And if you're able to do that and relatively quickly, because I think the other committee is hoping to move forward, but we can't obviously dictate your pace. So
If I may, I would just offer this. We don't I don't think we feel like we need to have a position necessarily on this bill, but you asked us to come in and talk about it, so we wanted to try to inform your discussion as much as we can. So we're happy to dig deeper if you want us to try to come up with an opinion, but we really want to coordinate with law enforcement just to make sure that we're not making their jobs harder or worse. But if you don't want to wait for our opinion, I think that's fine too. And we could always discuss it on the Senate side if necessary, if there were some tweaks that we thought were important.
I think just another consideration and maybe sort of reason to just keep in mind that the other committee has perhaps taken a lot of testimony on this, I don't know, and thought about the implications from the animal cruelty director, for example. But if we were to require someone to, on the first violation, forfeit a large herd, what would happen to those animals? Where would they go? Who would be responsible for them then? So just something to think about. And then before we let you go, well, actually, before I move to the next topic.
Yeah, I can fully understand being married to a veterinarian about having a veterinarian accompany during the seizure or serving of the warrant, because we don't have an overabundance of veterinarians looking for something to do.
Especially on very short notice.
Yeah,
Both
yeah.
situations, I received the phone call, I'm on my way. That's going to be a problem.
So, yeah, so I can understand that and fully support it. And, you know, if they have the evidence to go in and do it anyway, you do it. And then if the animal needs to be looked at afterwards for a degree, then you can get a veterinarian.
And again, the sections above and below have those allowances for being taken to a vet after the seizure. So I think the language is already, the intent is already baked in. We just need to find a way to make sure that it's applicable to all situations.
There was another section that I think we were asked to just take a look at, and I'll mention it to you in case it's something that you want to provide feedback on, and that's the expediting the process for getting somebody who's been accused of animal cruelty to fairly quickly through the process, so that the animals are not in limbo. And I think it involved having somebody, file within 14 days or something like that, 10 days.
I'm going to leave that one up to law enforcement and the lawyers, that it's not really a veterinary opinion. So
Okay.
I'm going to defer to people who live more in that world.
And agency overall, Steve?
It's really not something that's in our bailiwick. I mean, I understand the impetus for it. It's to try to make sure that there's not animals being cared for by without any payment indefinitely, because it can really drag on. So it makes perfect sense, but it really is something that prosecutors and law enforcement probably are the best suited to weigh in on the practicality of it.
Good, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Good, so committee, what would we like to know before is there anything else that we would like to know? I mean, we've raised some interesting topics. We could just provide some feedback as is. Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to know before it's in the final version, what happens with the forfeiture of livestock and poultry.
Where did they go, you mean, or?
Yeah, I mean, like the language we were just talking about, like the way it is right now is if you have one violation, then you keep whatever animals you have. And I mean, maybe it could have language added that would be more nuanced if it was somebody's livelihood or something like that. But like, I wouldn't mind seeing some of that changed.
So that could be our recommendation back to the Judiciary Committee.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. I mean, I know a person who tortured a bunch of cats and killed them and was incarcerated for that. And he went to prison for one series of killing cats, but one series of killing cats, like, that's not a person who should be taking care of livestock and poultry either, So some people do really rotten things to animals and they don't deserve to have poultry and livestock either, is my take on it. I think Emily wants to weigh in.
Uh,
You allowed from
I don't
this,
have to, I know why it's not in there, but you can ask Eric.
okay.
Representative Krasnow is here. Why don't we, thank you, Dr. Levine. I think you can, we'll invite Representative Krasnow to come up and.
Sure. I can,
Okay,
Thank you.
I don't mean to horn in.
Oh.
Obviously, this bill is very important to me. Representative Krasnow, for the record, lead sponsor. Originally, the original bill that I introduced with Representative Gosselin and Rachelson, I did have that type of language.
Mhm.
That is, I felt similarly. After what are we at, 6 weeks now? Grinding away in the legislative session. After 6 weeks of testimony in the Judiciary Committee from state's attorneys, advocates, the Division of Animal Welfare, law enforcement, so many folks, it's taken a lot of table time.
Mhm.
The committee, after how many drafts are we at, 3-ish? Made the decision as a committee that this approach with kind of the tiered system. And again, Eric can explain more about, why they chose that route, but it was really the consensus of the committee that was some of what Representative Lipsky had some to do with it, some other reasons, but the committee, after 6 weeks of testimony, changed that part. And also one other issue, is Judge Zoning. I don't want to speak for the judiciary,
Mhm.
but they weighed in extensively on this bill as well and made those changes and suggested changes. So while my original intent, that did not, the committee did not make that decision and change that piece. So I had a similar original, so they're not gonna.
They wouldn't be
No.
inspired if we changed the language.
Unfortunately, again, I don't want to speak for the committee, but that was in the original draft.
Mhm.
I wanted folks to have if folks were convicted of animal cruelty of any kind, I wanted them to have a lifetime ban
Mm.
on owning animals.
Mhm.
That's what I wanted as me. But that was not something that was something they went along with. And this was a compromise. They also added pieces with restorative justice, education components, because they felt like folks who may have abused animals might get another chance. There's different levels of abuse, right? Lisa, the animal welfare director, talked about different levels of cruelty, whether it's, there's different levels.
Yeah.
So that they wanted to do this tiered approach. But yes, so my original intent would be what you were saying, but that did not happen.
All right,
So that was the context, and I'm sorry to horn in.
no, it's fine.
I won't.
Because that way, it sounds like it's not worth us.
I mean, you could do,
Punching it.
you're, I'm not trying to sway the committee. I was just letting you know that the original bill did have that.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, appreciate it. I would say our committee was asked to review the language and make a recommendation. So I think that we should take that for what it's worth. And if we have a different perspective, let's share that. If, collectively, we should all try to find some kind of consensus. We might, I mean, I think you raised earlier an interesting point. There are animals that some of us have to make a living. Should that be a distinction? Should there just be some discretion? It'd be fairly easy to write it so that it's, instead of saying shall not be, could be.
Right.
So you give the court the latitude for,
And maybe that might go over.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Chairman, are we in a position where we could take a straw poll on
I think
this?
maybe
Or
we
do
should
have too
wait
many,
until, yeah, I mean, I think we can check back with Ledge Council, share this thought, bring it back to the committee. We can, in the meantime, reflect on it ourselves and have side conversations perhaps, but,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, thank you. And then, while we're all gathered here, Steve Collier from the Ag Agency has a couple other bills to, that we have looked at already that belong to other committees. And we wanted just again to get whether the agency had any concerns or feedback. And these two bills are H 632, which is the bill that the Environment Committee, miscellaneous, I think, Environment Bill. There was some CAFO language. You might recall ANR's your equivalent in the Agency of Natural Resources. Steve came in, walked through that language, and then Michael Grady came in. I think we were all pretty comfortable with it, but what is the Ag Agency's thoughts on?
Sure. So good afternoon, Steve Collier from the Agency of Agriculture. So on H 632, we did have a couple of kind of minor concerns with the original draft, and I'm looking at 4.1 now, which is the latest one that I believe is in the House Environment Committee, and we're fully aligned with ANR on the bill as it is. They've removed, there was a provision in the original draft that gave sort of some undefined discretion to the Secretary of ANR to determine that somebody was a CAFO. And it was just unnecessary because the Secretary already has that authority, provided there's a discharge, provided there's a reason for a CAFO under federal law. So there was some language there that was just kind of ambiguous and potentially confusing. We talked to ANR about that. ANR agreed. ANR asked the House Environment Committee to take that language out. It is out in the latest draft and 4.1. So we're comfortable with that change. The only other change was really minor, but there was a use of, in the federal law, when they talk about animal numbers, they use cow/calf, and that means a cow-calf pair. That's part of the way that you count to the numbers that trigger the authority. And it was changed to be cow or calf, which is confusing because you might be thinking about two cows or two calves. And so now in the latest draft, it says cow and calf instead of cow/calf. I personally think the cow/calf is a little cleaner, but it really doesn't matter.
They can't read up for you. You, that flash is pretty.
But we're fine with cow and calf. I mean, somebody could argue that it means two cows or two cows, but I'm not worried about it. I mean, I can go through the language if you want, but we're comfortable with the draft 4.1. ANR is aligned. It's all, just for a little context, it's just language to clarify a little bit S124 that was passed last year that we spent a lot of time on. And it's all language that is clarifying. None of it is problematic from our concern. I don't think it does a lot, but it helps, and ANR wants it. And EPA, some technical staff at EPA had requested it earlier, back in May, I think, of 2025. And so that's why ANR requested it, just to sort of continue in that process. And so we're fully supportive of those changes as well.
It does say cow and calf pair, correct? It's gotta have the pair in there, otherwise
The word pair.
it has to have the word pair, because that's how we refer to it, usually cow / calf pair.
Yes, it does have pairs,
Okay,
yes.
as long as it's pairs. The mother and child, yeah.
Well, the orchard owner would think it might be PEAR. You're right. So cow and calf pairs, that does it. That gets it done.
Looks like it says cow and calf pairs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know that we'll be asked to stand up on the floor and share what our committee's perspective was, but if we are, we could be prepared to say that we had a vote on it. And so let's do that.
Are you looking for voters?
Yeah, but so we don't have to keep Steve. Why don't we, if everybody's okay with that and doesn't have any other questions, nothing else to say on that one, Steve?
No.
Okay, so why don't we just have you tell us about the other bill then as well?
Sure. So the miscellaneous tax bill is, so the only thing that we quickly
Or on that.
It doesn't have one yet. It's a draft number. It's draft, I do have copies if you want. But I think I just printed the pertinent pages if you
Is it
want.
from Ways and Means?
It's from Ways and Means. It's draft 26-0727, draft 1.2 is what I have. I hope that's the right draft. I don't know for certain. But I did consult with the tax department about it.
We had Joe Remick come in last week and talk to us about I think there was two things. One was use current use related and making it easier for basically when some land is removed from current use and you're paying that tax on removal, the lister needs to go and do an assessment, and it can take a while, and they're trying to move things along. So they had some recommendations. The second thing was grazing, having grazing of your neighbor's land or somebody else's land, right?
Yes. Yes, so we're not, Agency of Agriculture is not directly involved in the mechanism for when you take land out of current use as a current use land use change tax, which is, I think, 10% of the fair market value. And the current setup is the town is supposed to do that appraisal within a defined, I think it's within 30 days, but they have to do it quickly because you're sort of delaying you're implicating the sale. And so they're supposed to do it quickly so the right tax can be charged. And sometimes I guess that doesn't happen. And so what the tax department is requesting, and it's completely reasonable to us, we support it, is if the town doesn't do it, that the tax department can do it within 30 days. But if that happens, then the town loses their share of the tax. So essentially, it doesn't change anything unless the town doesn't do the appraisal. If the tax department has to do it, then all of the tax money would come to the state. I think 3/4 of that would go into the ed fund and 1/4 of it would go into the general fund, but the municipality would lose out on that. So tax department has proposed that. We support it. These things do have to be done timely. The money, some towns may certainly be opposed to it, but I think they have the chance to remedy that by doing it timely. The other kind of related portion of that is, I believe right now there's a 14-day, so a landowner can appeal the fair market value determination. And I think right now it's a 14-day appeal period. And as I understand it, the tax department felt that was a little tight because it's kind of a confusing and elaborate process. So suggest a 30-day appeal period instead, which is just granting the landowner a greater right than they currently have. 30 days is not very much time to decide. Still, I mean, it's more than 14. I'm not, but so that feels totally reasonable to give somebody 30 days to determine whether or not they want to appeal that determination. So we're supportive of that as well. The other piece of it is that if you have to meet a $2,000 threshold if you're up to 25 acres when you're renting your land to be enrolled in current use to a farmer. And one way you can do that is by raising crops. And the way that it's defined now is if you sold hay, as an example, then you could get $2,000 for up to 25 acres. And I think it's $75 an acre after that, but with a cap of $5,000 total that you have to show. But there wasn't an explicit way to account for grazing animals rather than haying them. Obviously, pasture land is as important as any other crop use. And so the proposal from the tax department, which we fully support, is to allow for that $2,000 or $5,000 threshold to be met through a per head grazing fee rather than and that's how it often happens is if a farmer is paying a landowner to use their land, they'll often pay a per head fee. So if they can show that they're paying either $2,000 for up to 25 acres, $75 more for every acre after that, or $5,000 total, then the landowner who's renting to the farmer would still qualify to be enrolled in current use. I don't know if I did a very good job explaining that, but Representative Boslin gave me one of these, which I think means no.
No. That makes sense.
I think yes, it does like this. And when
And it
we,
was fine.
when we had the walkthrough from the tax department, they mentioned that this is not something happening every day. And there was maybe in fact one instance where it had happened, and it seemed like a reasonable suggestion.
I'm gonna tell you that paying $80 an acre to graze your cattle on is a very robust fee and probably never gonna happen from a farm. Just being realistic, if you think you got 25 acres of pasture land and you're gonna realize $2,000 from it for grazing cattle on. Yeah, good luck. Just do the math. It's $80 an acre. I mean, we rent. But if the person grazing the cattle is a farmer, then he doesn't have to pay anything to that landowner to keep their land free of brush and grass. Because he is a farmer and he files the Schedule Act, am I right?
Well, so this is about the sale of crops from somebody who's not the farmer. This is,
I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, if Michelle has a house and has 100 acres of it and some real good cornfield, and I rent her land, I'm the farmer, she can have it in current use. So if Jed has 25 acres on Randolph Road, and I said, Jed, I can't run my big equipment on there, but I can fence it in and bring down a bunch of buffalo and farm on it. Jed said, boy, I'm excited about having buffalo out there. I'll ride my turtle horse amongst them. But you know, I'm the farmer. We file a Schedule Act. So he can have it in current use. Am I correct?
well, this is the definition of current use as it is now. And one way that a landowner there's a presumption that you are using your land. So this is landowner, forget about the farmer, this is a landowner. There's a presumption that the landowner is using their land for agricultural purposes if, and this is one of the options, it has produced an annual gross income from the sale of farm crops in 1 of 2 or 3 of 5 calendar years preceding, that's at least 2,000 for parcels up to 25 acres, $75 per acre for each acre over 25, with a total income required not to meet 5,000. So that's what's in statute now. It says that if your land is for agricultural purposes, one of the ways you can meet that threshold is $2,000 from the sale of crops. What tax department is asking to include, and which we agree with, is one of the ways that you can be selling crops is by paying for grazing rights. So it's not changing the threshold at all. It's just making it clear that paying for grazing rights, whether or not that $2,000 is realized, that's a different question. But it would be only granting more, not less, than what's currently in the law. If that $2,000 is too much, that's a different. I haven't heard that, but that's a different discussion, which might be a relevant one.
Well, I'm just saying, if it's a legit farmer raising the critters out there, then it's farming. And
Sure. This isn't about whether it's farming though, whether the farmer's farming, regardless of whether the other landowner is enrolled in current use. This is about the landowner's ability to make use of the current use program, which a lot of landowners don't want to do because then they have to pay the land use change tax. But other landowners, I mean, many do take advantage of it, obviously, as well. I think we have, yes.
Yeah, this is a request that the tax department brought to us, and the agency seems to be okay with it. It seems, based on what we're hearing, from committee members, that maybe it's not going to happen more than once in a blue moon. But either way, the tax implications are trivial. I think the revenue implications are trivial, and
yeah, I mean, it's really treating hay the same way as treating grazing. If you can qualify for sale or any crop, the sale of any crop on your land, it's another way for landowners to be able to enroll and we think it makes sense to treat grazing no worse than any other agricultural crop activity. Yeah.
Representative Brett Bellins.
Farm crops does include hay currently. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
This makes sense, but it does seem like this would be a very easy place for fraud to happen. The whole process. Yeah,
The fraud to happen.
fraud for fraud,
Uh-huh.
but thanks for the explanation.
Representative Lee.
Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing because it's unrealistic to, I agree with Rep. Nelson. Most landowners that are not actively farming, whether they're in current use or not, are gonna value the grazing or the cropping, in my case, of fields. We do both. Neighbors graze and neighbors crop. But to Rep. Bartholomew's point, you can give someone a IOU for $2,000 with parentheses, it's a non-recourse IOU, you know, and which is sort of ripe for fraud. I mean, you have no expectation of getting paid a penny, but
Save a lot.
which save all that money. So I'm not super comfortable with this.
But I would just offer that you can always file a fraudulent tax return. The question, I mean, you can say you didn't make any money, but the question is whether that's true or not.
So you're
So.
a farmer or a logger, you probably have.
Current carry forward losses.
No, they'd only be good if someday, it's a stroke of luck, you had something to appreciate.
Well, I mean, are you envisioning, like this would be riper for misbehavior than doing anything else with the?
I worry, if I may, I worry about abuses to the current use program all the time. I really do. I think it's a great program for our working lands and people that use it for working lands, and whether it is the property that Nelson Farms owns or Bird's Orchard owns, or it's property that somebody bought the farm and they live on it, but they still want it farmed, so then they rent it out to a farmer, whether it's growing vegetables or livestock or a row crop farm. Those are all legit uses of farming. And I don't care if it's 25 acres or 5 acres or 500. What I worry about is the people that buy 50 acres in Vermont and they pop their house up on the hill and you don't know it's there until the leaves are off the trees. And they got their beautiful meadow down below and they're getting the tax break. And it's costing you and you and you and you and you and I and a good doctor on our school taxes because that land is not in the ed fund. And that's what I worry about. And you know, where I live, we all are on 10-acre lots because of Act 250. No one needed 10 acres, but we all got them. And Nelson Farms has that land. No one has their land in current use. And I worry about abuses to current use.
I think that's, I mean, of course, all of us are worried about abuses. I guess the question from our perspective on this bill would be if a landowner is renting their field for hay or to graze cattle or to plant other crops, and they're meeting the $2,000 threshold, which is what's required to do it, does it matter? No, this is not about the farmer. This is about the landowner. So but the landowner can only get the benefit if the farmer's using it. That's like if they're not giving access to their land for the farmer, then they don't get this. This is they're giving their land to a farmer, not giving, but others renting their land to a farmer to allow them to use it. And if they do that, we incentivize that process. So I don't think any of us think it's different if you're allowing grazing versus haying versus growing apples. Yeah.
Done by a farm.
Well, it's presumed to, right. It does say from the sale of farm crops or grazing rights. So it is, I mean, anybody who's growing hay or grazing cattle is in one sense farming. But you need income from this to do it. So I understand fraud is always a concern, but I think this change is allowing farmers to graze their cattle as well as grow other crops.
Your interpretation of the language, if you allowed a neighbor who had a horse just to have a horse, not making a living off of having a horse, to graze, and the neighbor paid you enough to meet the threshold dollar amount there, could that then be current use land?
I think so. If you paid $2,000, that's a better question for the tax department, just because we don't implement the current use program. So we're supportive, obviously, of extending this to grazing for cattle, but they are much more familiar with how they apply it. And I think Jill Remick is maybe coming back in.
Maybe she should.
I think she is tomorrow, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. So she's the director of the program. So she's, yeah.
Representative Bartholomew.
Wouldn't the neighbor who was grazing the horse have to be a farmer to qualify?
That was what I was getting at, yeah. Is that the case?
Anyway.
Well,
Your interpretation?
well, it's the sale of farm crops or grazing rights. And so horses are farm animals too. I think that's a better question for Joe Remick, just because I'm not sure exactly how they draw those lines. It's absolutely intended to benefit farmers by allowing them the use of the land.
So, okay, so we agree on that. That's what the bad intention is, yeah.
Right.
I agree with Representative Nelson's concerns about farming and possible fraud. But I think the changes proposed here make perfect sense. I mean, because what we're trying to achieve is that grazing and cutting hay, what's the difference? It's going to the animals.
That is farming.
So, yeah, I agree with that. And I hope that my question about fraud didn't derail the conversation, because while it's an issue, there's a lot of that in Vermont law where there's a potential for fraud. And someone who does that could be in for a very rude awakening if they suddenly decide that, no, I'm done now. I want to do something different with this land. It's going to be, oh, I didn't think of that.
Okay, well, sounds like we have some questions anyway to clarify, and
We're not voting on it by straw poll.
but and how do other people feel? We'll hold off on that one for another day.
Either way.
Yeah, the committee is not in as much of a rush for this one, I think, but if we want to take a vote on H 632, that would be.
Yeah, 632 on.
Yeah, okay. And this is just a straw poll, but Jed, if you want to get our minute or all or whatever you want to do. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. And it's the draft.
Draft number 4.1, that's 632.
It's 4.1 is a draft. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Sorry, we didn't have more concrete answers today, but we tried.
Better to throw so many curveballs and knuckleballs. Nice to see you, Doc.
Anytime. More animal questions next time. It will be helpful.
H 632, this is the miscellaneous environment bill with the CAFO. Yeah. All right, the clerk call the roll. I'm sorry, so what are we voting on? Motion to recommend to the House Committee on Environment that we concur
Yeah.
with the language in draft 4.1,
4.1.
page 632.
The title of the bill.
Miscellaneous environment. Yeah. Moving that, and there's no second necessary, according to my.
I just clear
parliamentarian.
Making motion been made. We're about to vote on H632 draft 4.1 miscellaneous environment bill. Today's date is the 12th. This is a straw poll. We're gonna do this straw poll vote by a show of hands. And so I will ask John L. Bartholomew, Shel Osborne, Greg Burgett, Richard Nelson, and John O'Brien is not here, and Chair Durfee in favorable vote. Please raise your hand as a signification of aye.
I see all hands are raised.
See 6, 0, 1.
601. Okay, good. All right, thank you, Representative Lipsky. I think our business is done for the day. I didn't realize that the tax department was coming in tomorrow. I'm not sure how that happened. And I want to make sure that it's actually happening. But, okay, all right. All right, thank you.